First, I decided to go rent a car from Enterprise car rental company. And Enterprise said, well, look, your driver's license is among the driver's license from 50 countries that we don't allow in Massachusetts. So if you are going to drive here, you have to get a new driver's license. So that's how it all began.
This is Religion Unplugged, an interview series about the global impact of religion in public life. For this episode, I interviewed Emeka Izeze, a board member of the Media Project and the former publisher of The Guardian of Nigeria. This is Paul Glatter with Religion Unplugged, and I'm sitting here in St. Petersburg, Florida, in a sunny morning in a park with one of our board members, Emeka Izeze from Nigeria. Emeka, how are you?
I'm very good, and thanks, Paul. I'm glad to be on Religion Unplugged podcast.
Emeka was the editor of The Guardian in Nigeria and publisher, executive. He's been a leader in media. At some point now, he's looking into new projects, and during that phase, right, you told me you were a fellow at Harvard. What were you doing at Harvard?
Well, I was a fellow at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, and I was doing some work on problems of international affairs and relations with respect, especially to the spread of extremism across Africa and the rest of the world. That was really where my work has been.
So you're doing this academic research, and you said you took your family there. At the time, I think you just had your wife and your son. Now you have a daughter too, right? But they were there with you in Cambridge, Massachusetts, near Boston?
Yes, we were living in Boston for a few months. It was very expensive moving around in Cambridge. The Uber, Lyft, whatever. I found that it will be much more cost effective for me to drive around while in Massachusetts. So I went to the driver's license office, motor vehicle license office, and I got there, and they explained to me that first I'll have to go through all kinds of tests, and I was very happy to do that.
A study released at the beginning of the year found Massachusetts has one of the hardest driving tests in the country.
Massachusetts road test is one of the most difficult ones. They're very, very strict.
I was surprised that everybody complained about the licensing office, but I didn't, because I just found that there was a system and that you knew that the system exists. Right. You either prepare to meet up with the system or the system will catch up with you. And I really liked it, because I'm not usually where I come from. That system doesn't quite exist. You can't specifically say in many respects, this is the process you have to go to get this, including a driver's license. Even if the process is there on paper, it's hardly followed. People tend to follow it more in the breach.
Most of us Americans, Emeka, we the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, it's what we dread, going to get our license, the waiting in the line, the bureaucracy of it all, bringing all the documents. But when you told me about this, you were like, hey, this was like so amazing to me, that the way you get a driver's license in America.
Yeah, the first time I went, I didn't go with all the documents. Then I came back again, and then I had to do a snap eye test right there. They checked and they found that, okay, you can drive, you can see well. And then they asked me to go pay, and I went to pay. And then right there, I did all the payment. By the way, I was thrilled that right there at the motor vehicle licensing office, I was directed to their computer to say, okay, just key in your name. And as I did that, I found all my details, the date of arrival, where I'm staying, when I'm leaving, all of them in the system. It was very impressive for me, because I could see that there is a sharing of data. Everybody drawing from a certain database, and it's working. If people in the motor vehicle licensing office could have my details, and they had no clue that I was going to go there anyway, but the details were there. I said, it then means that this thing works. So I was ready to go through it patiently, and I really enjoyed doing it.
Well, how do you get a driver's license in Nigeria? How is the process different there?
is rather chaotic. Getting a driver's license in Nigeria, I can't say for certain that this is the process you follow, because then everybody has his own system of getting it, and I would prefer a place where they will insist on you going like everyone else the same way, which was what I found in Massachusetts.
Wow.
And there wasn't any sort of confusion about what I had to do. I had to get all the documents correctly. I had to come to the office. I had to do an eye test. These are not things that you do regularly in Nigeria or some of the other third world countries. Then I had to sit down and do a test. They directed me to a computer, and that one nearly took me by surprise because I never prepared for it. I had no clue that I was going to do a test, but I've been driving for years. So I said to myself, what are they going to ask that I don't know? And it turned out to be so, because I've been driving for years. I went to the computer, I had this test, preset test, and I think I didn't answer 5 questions, but I got the rest. I must have got over 80%.
High five, brother. High five.
So after the test, I just walked straight to a desk, and the lady there opened and saw my result and said, okay, you went through it. Now we're going to give you a learner's permit. Now that was laughable, but I said, I laughed, and they issued a learner's permit and then said, you have to go choose a date, book an appointment to do a driving test, and you have to come with your car, you have to come with the driver on the day of the test. So I went to the computer again, paid a little money, fixed an appointment, and then I left and went. On the day, I came with this driver. He had a driving school. Yeah, that was the only person I could see who would let his car be used and who will also be available to come with me. And he just sat beside me. He knew that I could drive probably better than himself, or as well as himself. And so we came, and he was sitting at the back on the day of the test, and the guy who was going to test us, we just drove and queued up. When it got to our turn, the guy testing just walked into the car, and we entered, and he said, drive. And so I kept driving. I had gone through all these experiences. I drove, and I did very well.
Wow.
And, I was. If you are being tested, you have to be at your very best of behavior while driving. And
were you nervous?
No.
You're a seasoned driver. Okay.
I have passed being nervous. I've been driving for so long, and
Okay.
I actually enjoy driving.
Well, did they make you parallel park, Emeka? Because that's when you're a teenager getting your license in America. You know that we have horror stories of having the parallel park is where a lot of people make their mistake. In their driver's test. How about you? How'd you do?
No, they didn't. Incidentally, I was prepared for that. I think they suspected that I would know how to do parallel parking, but they made me do some other things like get into an intersection and. He just keeps quiet and decides to allow me go wherever I want to go. And sometimes there is no traffic light, and then he will just keep quiet and watch what I was going to do. So I had known that if you get to an intersection, even where there's no traffic light, you have to wait. And you have to give pedestrians the right of way. Now, these are best of behaviors in driving, and I just follow them because I knew them all along. But for me, the whole idea that after driving for over 30 years, I had to undergo a driving test.
Yeah.
And it was also something hilarious for me, and I just did it.
Yeah, then you had fun with it, it sounds like. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Then he asked me to make a turn. And I think that was where he wanted to test me, and I made a turn. As soon as I made a turn, he said, no. He said, you're okay. Let's go back.
Okay.
And then he came back and stamped my learner's permit paper and said, now you have a driver's license, we'll deliver it to you.
Certified driver in America, Emeka Izeze.
Ironically, that's something, again, that doesn't happen at home. 4 days later, in my mailbox in the house, I received the driver's license in the mail. Now, nobody is going to mail the driver's license to you back home. You have to go there. You have to wait through one office, from one office to the other. You have to search through. But here I was, 4 days after doing the driving test, and I opened my mailbox, and there was a driver's license in the mail. I never went back to the motor vehicle license office anymore. I
Wow.
got a driver's license
Well,
in the mailbox.
so that does not happen
That
in
doesn't
Nigeria?
also
Why?
happen back home. And
What would
I
you do
think
instead back home for that?
you have to go back to the driver's license office, and you have to go through the same process of searching through words and words of driver's license already stuck there for people who hadn't come to collect.
Right.
And then you have to spend time. Actually, it's the whole idea that because the system here is stratified, you know exactly what you're going to do at any given time. It is very easy for people who are also orderly to face it. So when
to
I
navigate
say,
the system,
yeah, when
okay.
it's fairly straightforward. Obey the rules, and you're going to get your driver's license.
Yeah.
and you
Let me
just
ask
learn
something.
to
You
drive.
didn't talk about like bribes, but I wonder, do people have to sometimes bribe officials to get a driver's license?
Back
Is that
home, yeah,
an issue?
officials will expect you in some respects to give them some tips for them to do what is their job. And I didn't see any of those. I didn't even get to talk to anybody on a personal basis. So there was no need for anybody. Everybody was in the office.
Yeah.
So but back home, sometimes you will run into a deliberate roadblock.
A deliberate roadblock.
Yeah, so you will then begin to ask, please help me, and then they begin to expect that you will.
don't have 25,000 naira. Okay, chop better thing. I say chop better thing, make it go your way.
This video has surfaced on the internet showing a police officer asking an offending motorist for a bribe. The policeman tries to justify the amount he's demanding by claiming he's not working alone.
1,000 I collect from you. No.
In Nigeria, many offenders prefer to bribe the police rather than going through long-winded proceedings. Nigeria's police officers are often associated with corruption, harassing or even begging civilians for money.
How do they do that? They say, oh, there's a special fee for that or something, and they try to make it...
At other times, they tell you that they can pay for you, and then they overquote to you, and because you are not willing to go through the process, go and sit down and see how much they're paying, you end up paying more for the driver's license. That happens.
Has that happened to you?
Oh, yes, it has happened many
You had
times.
to pay.
I suspected that I was overcharged, but because I didn't want to wait and go through the process, then I had to pay. They will just say to you, it costs so much.
Right.
And pay, and then you hand the money to them. And but he never asked, how much exactly is it, which is different from here.
Yeah.
Here you know how much it is. They ask you to pay online. It is only now we're beginning to catch up with paying online, but it hasn't quite solved the problem back home. For me, societies that work are societies where little things work.
Where
and little things like knowing the process for getting driver's license. Having to go through that process and getting a driver's license and driving legitimately in such a society. I really
it's a symbol. You're saying that.
Oh, yeah.
I think you're saying that these seemingly little things like getting a driver's license and the clarity and
in the
the rule of law.
Yeah.
The rule of law you see in that process relates to higher level processes. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and eventually reflects in how things are done generally in that society. And where there is so much chaos in getting driver's license, it's something as simple as getting driver's license and something that is going to have some consequence on others if you are not a very good driver and you are on the road. And something as simple as that, you ought to know the process, and if the process is followed, you find there will be more orderliness in the society. Nobody is going to go looking to make money out of it, or nobody is going to go to cut corners in it. So it works, and I look out for those things, getting driver's license and having to go and avoid giving people money to go and do things for you, doing it yourself. I really think that Africa should learn a great deal from countries such as here, and not necessarily in terms of how to amass so much wealth, because that would take something else. But I'm talking of how to do things in an orderly manner, in a predictable manner. Societies ought to be more predictable than there are back home in Africa. And the moment you put rules in place that will make the society more predictable, nobody wakes up today and he never had any driving test, and the next day he's already driving on the road. No, it doesn't happen here. And because it can't happen here, there is a certain predictability that you have of those who are in vehicles and driving in the society. Those little things are the things that I look out for to see whether there are better things happening in a country. And Africa should begin to look at little things. Let's reform our processes. Let's reform our systems. And these ones don't cost money. What we're discussing here.
It's cheaper now than in the past for computers and the mobile internet.
How much money does it cost to do? You just need people who are ready to insist on the rule and ensure that everyone else follows the rule. And that is it.
Well, since our podcast is Religion Unplugged, I want to see, can we bring it back to religion? You are a man of faith yourself. What is the role of the church? What's the role of religion in this, the application of this concept you're talking about?
Actually, a society such as we have in most of Africa is ripe for this sort of concept. What has failed is a system of governance that has not quite delivered as expected. And as a result, people are looking for other means to get what they want. And that creates all the chaos and all the confusion. And a society that is utterly religious, you might say most of our societies are so religious, but not quite, you don't see too much righteousness in their conduct. But let's even stop at the level of being religious. We have a large population of Christians, we have a large population of Muslims across Africa. The Muslims will pray five times in a day, every day. And the Christians will go to church. These days, it's no longer going to church only on Sundays. You now go to church several days in a week because there are different programs in different churches. So we are all very religious. It ought to be that such a society will find it easier to operate in a more orderly way. But what has happened is that whereas the bulk of the people profess religion, whatever religion, the conduct is bereft of religious character, religious output. You don't see righteousness being reflected, whether from the Muslims or from the Christians, particularly those of them in this kind of position where you have to insist on following the rules. And I think it's because people, number one, are looking for what they're going to get out of it. And number two, people just don't have the patience and the discipline to follow the rules that they themselves have made. And so
I'm wondering, is there a role for ministers or the church to champion order, to champion rules, to champion justice for society in this way?
Obviously, Paul.
It's outside the bounds of a church to go and try to set up a Department of Motor Vehicles, but is there something more pastors and churches could do on this?
What churches, or even take mosques, since that's also very preponderant in our society. What they ought to do is to preach, to sway the people to behave well. And when people imbibe the message, the religious message coming from a church, or the preaching from a pastor or a priest in a church, or an imam in a mosque, it ought to be that the people will imbibe that message, internalize it, and then allow the message to regulate and condition their conduct. And when that happens, you say that this church is having an effect. But of course, how many people are truly following that rule in such a society as ours? Even though they go to church, even though they go to mosque, they don't quite follow the rule. It looks like being a religious person is more fashionable than doing what the Almighty wants you to do. So what role do they have? Those who are preaching, whether as pastors, priests, or imams, I think that the role is to begin to strike at the little things that will make the people behave right. And of course, get those who are in authority, those who are in government, those who are in public offices, or even private organizations, get people to follow set down rules. Ask that anybody who is truly a Christian must not seek ways to cut corners. Imagine that kind of preaching to a congregation. You will be amazed that when they leave that church that day or leave that mosque that day, everybody will be a bit sobered up.
Yeah.
And you're not likely to go the next day
Yeah.
and start looking for how to cut corners. Because what happens is that when you are not delivering good governance, then the people are looking for ways to cut corners. So those in authorities, they are preached to give their very best on their job to deliver good governance. And those that are citizens of such societies, they're preached to follow the rules, to obey good conduct, to obey and get out good conduct in their lives. I'm telling them that this is part of obeying the Almighty God.
Yeah. I think this is fascinating, this discussion. And my last question is, what's the status of your American license now? And when are you going to be driving here next?
The American license is valid for, I think, 5 years. And I hope that when it expires, if I'm still here for a pretty long time, I'll go renew it, because I was impressed with, really, for me, it was one of those defining points, which is quite surprising to many of you Americans and even some people who are coming from outside of America, and they don't see why am I making so much fuss about it. But and I say to them that if you follow this process, you're going to have a good government operating, and the society will be the better for it. Driving here, once you know that you can drive, and also most times you count on the goodness of the other road user. Once you have that all settled, taking a road trip here is always a pleasure, because the road is very good and the connections are fairly simple. You don't get lost easily when you're driving here.
Yeah, I know you took one trip, if I recall, right before Trump got elected, that November, 2016, you took a road trip all over the U.S. to kind of discover what people were thinking, right? You went to Illinois and places like that.
I stayed in a town called Naperville in Illinois, yes, and then I drove around Illinois, and from there headed to Springfield, which is the capital, which is fairly far away, and then I had done and then drove back. I think did a few trips to Chicago. And so I can tell you that on none of those occasions did I feel that I shouldn't have been driving. I just enjoy driving here.
Okay.
And it's a pleasure to drive here. And I've driven where I didn't have to run into very huge traffic jam. Of course, I haven't driven in New York.
It's not like Lagos.
No, it's not like Lagos. Lagos, it reminds New York is like a gigantic portrait of Lagos, of a miniature Lagos, particularly with regards to driving and getting trapped in traffic for hours. And in Lagos, it's a way of life. So driving, therefore, is also adult for many people, because you know that if you're going to close at rush hour, you're going to stay on the road for at least 2 hours every day.
Yeah. Do you know where your next road trip might be? Do you have a dream for your next road trip in America?
I'm going to do, it's not really a big road trip, but I'm sure that around here in Florida, I think I will rent a car for a day. I might, when I get to California, I might also rent a car for a day or two and then drive around.
And drive around. That's what Emeka does.
It's cheaper and it's easier.
Yeah.
Just go easy.
Well, we wish you a great road trip, sir, and we thank you for talking with us today. Emeka, thank you so much, my friend, for telling us about this road trip and driver's license journey and your thoughts on it all.
Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate this. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I like talking about.
Fantastic. Well, signing off for Religion Unplugged, this is Paul Glatter and Emeka Izeze. This episode of the Religion Unplugged podcast was hosted by Paul Glatter, edited and produced by Peter Freeby, with production assistance from Melissa Harrison. Special thanks to Emeka Izeze and Megan Clark. The Religion Unplugged podcast is a production of religionunplugged.com and is a part of The Media Project, a nonprofit dedicated to equipping journalists to cover religion. To read our award-winning global religion news coverage or to find out more about Religion Unplugged or the Media Project, visit religionunplugged.com or follow us on Twitter at ReligionMag.